Welcome to Stoic. Tell me, ever felt like you're surrounded by actors? I know I have. People wear masks every day, pretending to be something they're not. But here's the wild part. Once you learn to read between the lines, you'll see right through the act. I remember sitting in a meeting, everyone nodding and smiling, but I knew that under those smiles were hidden agendas. It was all in the feet, the silence, the little pauses. And trust me, once you learn to pick up on these signs, you'll never see people the same way again. Ready to uncover what they're really hiding? Let's dive in. 1. The tell me more technique. Let me tell you, this technique is like having a superpower, but without the flashy costume or cape. The best part? No one even realizes you're using it. It's so simple yet so effective. All you do is sit back, stay calm, and when someone's passionately telling you their side of the story, instead of jumping in with your opinion or debating them, you hit them with 3 little words. Tell me more. I stumbled upon this years ago during an argument with a friend about whether pineapple belongs on pizza of all things. I was ready to counter every point they made, but something clicked, and instead of debating, I just smiled and said, "Tell me more." What happened next was wild. They started off talking about pizza, but before long, they were spilling out childhood memories of family dinners, the foods they loved, and even a weird story about why they hated pineapple as a kid. It wasn't just about pizza anymore. It was a deep dive into their inner world, all from 3 little words. Here's the thing. When people feel heard, they lower their guard. And when they don't feel the need to defend themselves or argue back, they end up sharing way more than they planned. You create a safe space, one where they feel comfortable enough to drop their usual defenses. They might think they're just making conversation, but in reality, they're revealing their motivations, fears, insecurities, and even their hopes, all without realizing it. I've used this trick in business meetings, with friends, even with people who were clearly being a little shady. One time during a negotiation, instead of pushing my agenda, I just kept saying, "Tell me more." By the end of it, the other party had laid out their whole strategy, explaining why they were desperate for a deal. They practically gave me the keys to their kingdom, and all I did was listen. It felt almost too easy. But here's the deeper truth. This isn't just a tactic to get more information or win an argument. It's about connection. In a world where everyone is quick to talk but slow to listen, tell me more becomes a way to understand people on a deeper level. It forces you to step outside your own ego, to stop thinking about what you'll say next, and to genuinely care about the other person's perspective. When you ask people to explain themselves without judgment, you give them a rare gift, being truly heard. And in that moment, you build trust, understanding, and sometimes even healing. This technique reflects one of the core teachings of Stoicism, empathy without attachment. You're not trying to manipulate or control the conversation. You're simply observing, understanding, and remaining calm. It's not just about reading people, it's about seeing them for who they really are and allowing them the space to reveal their true selves. So the next time you're in a conversation, whether it's a casual chat, a negotiation, or even a heated debate, try the tell me more technique. You'll be amazed at how much deeper the conversation goes, how much people reveal, and how easy it becomes to really understand them without ever having to push. And beyond just winning a conversation, you'll come to see that this approach builds real human connections grounded in respect and genuine curiosity. That's where the true power lies, seeing others, and through them, learning more about yourself. 2. Watch how they treat people in a lesser position. If you really want to know someone's true character, don't just watch how they treat you. Watch how they treat the people they consider beneath them. This one's a bit controversial because, let's be honest, it reveals the harsh truth about human nature. Whether it's a waiter at a restaurant, a cashier at a grocery store, or even a colleague at work who's lower on the corporate ladder, how someone interacts with those who have less power says volumes about who they are. I learned this the hard way. I used to work with someone who, on the surface, seemed like the nicest person, charming, funny, and always respectful in meetings. But then, one day, we went out to lunch, and I saw a different side of them. The moment we sat down, they were rude to the waiter, barking orders like they were royalty, and the server was beneath them. It was shocking to see how quickly they shifted from friendly and warm to dismissive and arrogant. That was a wake-up call for me, and I realized this wasn't a one-time slip. It was a reflection of their real character. They were only kind when it benefited them. People show their true nature when they think no one important is watching. If they're condescending to the waiter, they'll be condescending to anyone they believe can't fight back. If they're dismissive of a colleague because they're in a junior position, guess what? That arrogance and lack of respect will surface in other areas of their life too. The person who's kind to you but rude to others, they're not kind, they're calculating. Think about it. When there's no social pressure to be polite and someone knows they can get away with treating others poorly, that's when their real personality shines through. Stoicism teaches us to observe human behavior objectively, and this is one of the clearest indicators of a person's integrity. It's easy to be nice when there's something to gain, but true character is revealed when someone has nothing to lose. I've used this principle in friendships, work relationships, and even dating. It's become a kind of silent test for me. If someone treats the janitor with respect, if they say thank you to the bus driver, or if they show kindness to a stranger, that's someone worth knowing. But if they're the type to be unnecessarily harsh or dismissive, that's a red flag that can't be ignored. And here's where it gets even deeper. How we treat others is a reflection of how we see ourselves. People who respect everyone, regardless of status, are often secure in themselves. They don't need to put others down to feel important. But those who are cruel to others, they're often projecting their own insecurities, trying to elevate themselves by stepping on those they deem weaker. It's a form of arrogance that Stoicism teaches us to recognize and avoid in ourselves. So, if you want to know who someone truly is, don't be fooled by how they treat people they need to impress. Instead, pay attention to how they treat those with nothing to offer. It's the surest way to see beyond the mask, into the heart of who they really are. 3. Their past is the key to their present. If you want to truly understand someone, take a deep look at their past. People often say, the past is behind us, but the truth is, it's not really gone. It's shaping everything about who they are today. Whether they realize it or not, their experiences, traumas, victories, and relationships are all influencing how they think, behave, and even treat you in the present moment. This can be controversial because it implies that people don't just move on. They carry their history with them, and sometimes that history is the blueprint for their actions. I had a friend who always seemed to be on edge. No matter the situation, they were overly defensive, quick to anger, and extremely cautious in relationships. At first, I thought it was just part of their personality, but as I got to know them better, I learned about their past. They had been deeply betrayed by people they trusted, had experienced financial hardship, and had grown up in an environment where they constantly had to prove themselves. The dots started connecting. Their defensiveness wasn't random. It was the direct result of feeling like they had to protect themselves from being hurt again. Our past experiences leave marks, sometimes scars, and they can explain why someone acts the way they do. A person who grew up feeling neglected may crave constant attention as an adult. Someone who's been burned by a business partner may now distrust anyone who tries to collaborate with them. The key here isn't to make excuses for people's behavior, but to understand that they're not always acting out of the present moment. They're reacting to echoes from their past. Stoicism teaches us to look at things as they are, without judgment, and understanding someone's past is part of seeing them clearly. I've seen this play out in romantic relationships too. You ever date someone who seems perfectly fine at first, but then certain patterns start emerging? Maybe they're overly jealous or struggle with commitment. 9 times out of 10, if you dig deep enough, you'll find that their past relationships have left wounds they haven't fully healed from. It's the fear of being hurt again that drives their behavior in the present. When you understand that, it doesn't mean you have to tolerate toxic behavior, but it gives you insight into why they're acting the way they are. And here's the tough truth. People often live their lives stuck in cycles, repeating behaviors learned from past experiences. It's like they're trapped, reliving the same patterns over and over without even realizing it. That coworker who constantly seeks validation, they're likely replaying a childhood where they never felt good enough. The friend who sabotages every relationship, they're likely responding to a deep fear of rejection that stems from past heartbreak. Their reactions, their habits, their decisions, it's all a mirror reflecting the unresolved parts of their past. But here's where it gets even deeper. Understanding someone's past not only helps you navigate your relationship with them, but it can also help them break free from these cycles. If you can gently point out the patterns they're repeating, you might help them become more self-aware. In doing so, they might finally confront what they've been avoiding for years. Stoicism emphasizes self-reflection and improvement, and sometimes understanding someone's past allows you to guide them toward bettering themselves. It's easy to judge people based on how they act right now, but the past is the key to unlocking the reasons behind those actions. If you liked our video, like, subscribe, and comment so that YouTube knows that this type of content helps people like you, and we can continue creating more similar videos in the future. If you don't know what to comment, simply write "Silence is power" to show that you have surpassed our session. When you start seeing people's behaviors as responses to their history, you can approach them with more empathy, while also protecting yourself from getting drawn into their unresolved issues. In short, the past is always present. To truly understand someone, you have to see the full picture, not just the chapter they're currently living. 4. Sudden changes in tone. Signal lies or hesitation. One of the biggest giveaways that someone is lying or hiding something is a sudden change in their tone of voice. Most people don't realize it, but our voices often betray what's going on beneath the surface. When someone's speaking confidently, their tone is usually steady, their pace even, and their words flow naturally. But when there's a lie or hesitation, things shift. Sometimes in subtle ways, sometimes dramatically. It's like their subconscious is trying to throw up red flags, hoping you'll notice. I once had a coworker who was always smooth talking, always knew exactly what to say, and always delivered it with charm. But one day, when we were discussing a project deadline, something changed. His voice, usually upbeat and confident, suddenly dropped, and his words came out slower, almost stuttering. I immediately sensed something was off, and sure enough, it turned out he hadn't made any progress on the project, but was trying to cover it up. That shift in tone was the key. He wasn't telling the full truth, and it was written all over how he spoke. Here's why this happens. When people lie or feel uncomfortable with what they're saying, their body and mind go into conflict. Their brain is trying to maintain the lie or hide their uncertainty, but their body, specifically their voice, can't help but reflect the stress. It might come out as a higher pitch, A crack in their voice, or even a pause that feels just a bit too long. It's like their tone is out of sync with their words. Think about the last time you caught someone in a lie. What did their voice sound like? Did they suddenly get quieter, or maybe they started speaking faster? Maybe their voice took on a forced cheerfulness, like they were trying too hard to sound normal. These are all signs that something isn't right. The shift in tone is a subconscious way of signaling discomfort, whether it's because they're lying, hiding something, or just unsure of themselves. It's not just about catching lies either. Sudden tone changes also signal hesitation or uncertainty. I once had a friend who would get really enthusiastic about plans we made, but the moment I suggested something she didn't really want to do, her tone would change instantly. She'd go from excited to monotone, like someone had flipped a switch. That was always my clue that she wasn't fully on board, even if her words said otherwise. This phenomenon happens in relationships, business deals, and even casual conversations. You've probably experienced it too, when someone suddenly goes from upbeat and friendly to defensive or evasive, even if their words don't match the shift. It's in those moments you need to start paying attention, not to what they're saying, but to how they're saying it. A sudden drop in energy, a shift in pitch, or a hesitation that wasn't there before can be the subconscious cue that the person is lying or holding back something important. And here's the deeper Stoic lesson. People often lie not just to deceive others, but to deceive themselves. When their tone changes, it's not always because they're trying to manipulate you. It's often because they're uncomfortable with the lie they're telling themselves. This discomfort seeps into their voice, giving them away without them even knowing it. Stoicism teaches us to observe without judgment, and this is a prime example of how you can use that observational power. By paying attention to the subtle shifts in someone's tone, you can get a clearer picture of their internal struggle. It's also worth noting that we do this to ourselves. How often have you said something you didn't fully believe and noticed your own voice falter? Your tone becomes the mirror of your inner doubt. This is why Stoicism emphasizes the importance of aligning your thoughts, words, and actions. When they're not in harmony, it shows, often in ways you can't control. So, next time you're in a conversation and you notice someone's tone shift unexpectedly, whether it's a sudden drop in energy, an awkward pause, or a pitch change, don't ignore it. Ask yourself, what are they holding back? What are they uncomfortable with? It might not be a full-on lie, but there's a good chance they're not telling you the whole truth. Their voice is their tell, and if you listen closely, you'll hear it every time. 5. The most honest moments are when they think no one's watching. If you really want to know who someone is at their core, watch them when they think no one's paying attention. These are the moments when people drop the mask they wear for society, the social persona they've crafted to fit in or get ahead, and reveal their true nature. It's a controversial truth because most of us would like to think that who we are in public is the same as who we are in private, but the reality is, people often behave very differently when they think no one's looking. I remember working with a manager who was always the picture of professionalism when the boss was around. She'd make polite small talk, maintain a calm demeanor, and never raise her voice. But the moment our higher-ups left the office, it was like she transformed into a completely different person. She'd snap at the team, make condescending remarks, and treat people with zero respect. It was jarring, and it taught me a valuable lesson. The person someone is when they don't think they're being watched is often their most authentic self. When people are in the spotlight, they're hyper-aware of how they're being perceived. They act in ways that they believe will earn approval or avoid conflict, but the second they feel they're out of view, the filters drop. You see it in small moments, how they react when they think no one will notice, how they treat people who can't offer them anything, or how they behave when they think they won't be held accountable. It's in these seemingly insignificant interactions that their true self is revealed. This applies to every aspect of life, from relationships to business to everyday encounters. Take romantic relationships, for example. At the beginning of a relationship, both parties are usually on their best behavior, trying to impress one another. But if you really want to know who someone is, observe them during the quiet moments, the ones where they're not actively trying to impress you. How do they treat the waitress when you're out to dinner? What are they like when they're stressed, or when they think you're not paying attention? Do they still show kindness, patience, and respect? Or do they let their guard down and reveal something less flattering? I've seen this play out in social settings too. You might have a friend who's the life of the party when everyone's watching, always cracking jokes and being the center of attention. But when they think no one's noticing, they might act aloof, selfish, or dismissive. Their true character comes through not in the big public moments, but in the small, hidden ones. Here's where the Stoic perspective comes in. As a Stoic, you're trained to observe life objectively and without judgment. People will often reveal their true nature when they think they're off stage, and it's in these moments you can truly understand them. Stoicism teaches us that virtue is not about how we act when people are watching, but how we behave when no one is. The person who remains kind, patient, and respectful, even when there's no one to applaud them, that's someone who lives in alignment with Stoic values. But the reality is, many people aren't like that. They compartmentalize their public and private selves, acting in ways that serve their image in public while letting their less appealing traits come out in private. I had a colleague who was incredibly supportive and warm whenever we were in a group meeting. He'd always have something positive to say and would go out of his way to show support. But when we were alone, his demeanor completely shifted. He was short, dismissive, and uninterested in helping unless it directly benefited him. That's when I realized his public persona was a facade. The most honest moments aren't when someone's under the spotlight. They're when they think no one's watching. Whether they're acting with kindness or cruelty, it's these unguarded moments that show the truth. And this is where you gain real insight into who they are. If someone can only be good when others are watching, it's not real goodness, it's performance. And here's the deep Stoic message. True character is who you are in the shadows, not in the spotlight. As Stoicism teaches, we must aim to live in alignment with our values at all times, regardless of who's watching. Whether the room is full or empty, a Stoic's actions are consistent because they come from within, not from the need for external validation. When you observe others in their unguarded moments, you'll not only see their truth, but you'll also remind yourself of the importance of living authentically, even when no one else is around. So, the next time you want to truly understand someone, don't focus on their grand gestures or public persona. Instead, pay attention to what they do when the spotlight is off. That's when you'll find their real character, and that's where the truth lives. 6. Emotional reactions reveal priorities. If you want to understand what truly matters to someone, look at how they react emotionally in various situations. Emotional reactions are like an unfiltered window into a person's soul. They expose their priorities, their values, and the things they hold dear. This idea can be controversial because many of us like to think we're in control of our emotions, that we can hide what we really care about. But the truth is, when someone reacts strongly, whether it's anger, excitement, or even anxiety, it's a clear signal that their emotional response is tied to something that matters deeply to them. Let me give you a personal example. I once worked with a colleague who was generally calm and composed. Nothing seemed to faze him. But one day, during a routine meeting, someone suggested a small change to one of his projects, and he suddenly blew up. I was taken aback by his outburst. It wasn't a big change, and certainly not something you'd expect to trigger such a strong reaction. But here's the thing, his emotional response wasn't about the change itself. It was about the fact that this project was his baby. He had put countless hours into it, and to him, it was more than just work. It was personal. That emotional outburst revealed how important that project was to him, even though he'd never explicitly said so before. People don't always tell you what matters most to them with words, but their emotions. They can't hide those. The boss who reacts angrily when you question his decision. That's not just about protecting his authority. It's because his sense of self-worth is tied to always being right. The friend who gets overly defensive when you point out something small. That's probably because what you mentioned taps into a deep insecurity or a value they hold dear. The excitement someone shows when they get praise for a job well done. That's because recognition is one of their top priorities, even if they'd never admit it. Here's the key. People's strongest emotional reactions, whether positive or negative, reveal their deepest priorities. They might act cool, detached, or indifferent in most situations, but when something they care about is threatened, challenged, or even acknowledged, their emotions flare up. This isn't just limited to negative reactions like anger or frustration, though those are often the most obvious. It's also about the things that bring them joy, make them light up, or get them animated. The excitement someone shows when they're talking about their side hustle or hobby. That's because it matters to them more than you might realize. In relationships, this principle is especially powerful. If you're dating someone and you notice they get disproportionately upset when plans fall through, that's a sign that spending time together is incredibly important to them. If they light up whenever you talk about a future trip or activity, it means that creating shared experiences is a priority. Emotions are always tied to values, and paying attention to someone's emotional cues gives you a clear map of their priorities without them ever having to spell it out. A good example of this is when people get unexpectedly defensive. Let's say you casually mention that someone's been late a few times, and instead of a calm acknowledgement, they get flustered and defensive. That reaction isn't just about the tardiness. It's because punctuality, or the appearance of being reliable, is something they care deeply about. Their emotional outburst is a reflection of how important that aspect of their identity is to them. They don't want to be seen as unreliable, so they lash out to protect that self-image. Stoicism teaches us to observe human behavior with an objective eye, and emotions are one of the most telling aspects of behavior. When someone's emotions flare, it's because something they value is at stake. You can use this knowledge to better understand people in your life and also to manage your own interactions with them. If you know what triggers their emotions, you can approach sensitive topics with more care or use that knowledge to build stronger, more understanding relationships. But here's the deeper Stoic lesson. Your emotions reveal your own priorities too. When you find yourself reacting strongly to something, take a moment to reflect on why. Is it because it genuinely matters to you, or are you letting your ego get in the way? Are you getting angry because someone is questioning your integrity, or are you just upset that your reputation is being challenged? Stoicism teaches us that by understanding our emotional reactions, we can gain greater control over them. We can recognize when our emotions are tied to values that truly matter and when they're just a reflection of our pride or insecurities.